Dean Smith was ready, or so he thought, to take on Aston Villa as Steven Gerrard brought his young guns to Carrow Road to take on Norwich City. But if only Norwich had have had something that could have warned them of the impending danger. Like a canary in a coal mine. This is Talk of the Trinity.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Talk of the Trinity podcast. I'm Baz Barrett. Joining me is Will Forrest from an undisclosed secret location, which may or may not be a government testing facility. We will have to leave MI5, MI6 to do their job to confirm otherwise. We are going to be talking to you about all things Villa over the course of the last few days, looking back and looking forward. But before we get into our usual frivolities, the upcoming festive period, if you believe the marketeers and what you see all over the TV in our day, but, kind of social media now, everybody's having a great time if you tune into all those channels. And this time of year is not necessarily the case for everybody. I mean, in terms of Christmas in the places that celebrate Christmas can be quite a lonely, challenging time for people, and in other places where Christmas isn't necessarily the centerpiece, there are trials and tribulations of life which can leave people feeling a bit lost, a bit lonely, a bit isolated. But here at Talk of the Trinity, we are here for you as best we can. So if you would just want to have a chat, it doesn't necessarily have to be about Villa, drop us a message on our YouTube page, also our Twitter page at Talk Trinity. It'll be probably easier for us to Twitter page on reflection, because we are monitoring that like hawks. So drop us a message on our Twitter page at Talk Trinity, and we'll do our best to cheer you up. If listening to the podcast is not enough in itself, which is where we go on to now with something that will hopefully cheer the listeners up, is talking about the events at Carrow Road on Tuesday night. Norwich City 0, Aston Villa 2. Went as easy as you thought it was, didn't it, Will?
Well, yeah. First half, the way we played, we didn't have to get out of the gear that we were in, really, did we? It was a bit too easy for us. It would have been nice, obviously, to have added a second goal. But we did at the end. We left it late, obviously. But we never really felt troubled. I think the only real chance for them was one that we manufactured ourselves with Ashley Young's attempted through ball for Emi Martinez, if you like. I was saying to Jake, because we were watching it, if anybody's going to score for them, it's going to be McLean, because they just kept focusing on him. Puts it wide. Thank God for that. Thank God they took Cantwell off as well. Not that he was really having much of an impact, but if anybody's going to grow into the game, you'd have thought it would have been him. Kept Pookie quiet, and we scored two amazing goals, as Steven Gerrard said, that came straight out of the academy.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to unpick in the game when on the surface it was quite a comfortable victory, as you said. I mean, we'll carry on the hot streak of positivity and talk about Ramsey's goal. Great finish, obviously, great run. I mean, we talked about in the preview about maybe Ramsey's energy bursting from centre midfield would be useful in this game. Maybe we weren't thinking quite to that extent, but, I think that Gerrard was obviously listening to us and decided to follow the lads and what they said. Great listening there, Steve. We look forward to engaging with you in the future. Slightly off the cuff question. When Ramsey gets the ball, do you think he had in his head what was going to happen in the next 5-10 seconds?
I mean, if you listen back to his interview and to what Gabby was saying as well afterwards, then Yeah, potentially. You know, we apparently Gabby Agbon-Lahore had been messaging him a couple of weeks before saying you need to drive with the ball more and just get at the goal. And Ramsey said the same. I mean, regardless of whether he wanted to do that, what a fantastic goal. The celebration afterwards, shushing the Norwich fans. There was talk that he'd done a certain hand gesture to them as well, which I don't think was actually the case. And then the kissing of the badge. So beautiful, especially when you found out that Grealish had just scored for Man City as well around about the same time. Well, I've got a question for you then, and I'm sure I know the answer. It was a great goal. It probably won't get all of the credit that it deserves because it's Aston Villa who have scored it, really, though you'd hope that it would. Is it up there with Daly and Atkinson's goal against Wimbledon in regards to one of the best ever Premier League goals? Does it surpass Atkinson's goal? Where do you rank it?
Does it pass it? No, it is my short answer. I think in terms, it's a great finish. Obviously, my view of it was the message, as you said, was when you see space, go for it. And Watkins plays him a great ball and gets absolutely clattered for it. Just too quick for the Norwich defender, and the space is right in front of him. So he sees the space, bang, straight edge of the penalty box. There is that brief moment where he looks up and he's like, he sees where do I go now? There's nobody in the coming up to support him quick enough for the layoff. So he's like, okay. It was calmness that I quite liked under pressure, in the sense of there wasn't an obvious route of what to do next, and pretty much you could try that where he was on the edge of the box. You could try that 10 more times, and you couldn't have done it any better than the way he did. And you could say in terms of sheer deliberateness, just the way the Norwich defenders kind of trying to turn him inside a little, and they left the near post free. And I think the goalkeeper wasn't necessarily expecting it to go there, and just how close, I know it's still 18 yards, but he did, to use a technical phrase, absolutely lever it. So that split second, the goalie thought his weight was going one way, having to get back, wasn't able to get across. But just the way that the ball goes, it's almost under the defenders in a way. Great finish, whether it could be replicated, which does raise it up in terms of the levels. But I'd probably say Atkinson still comfortably for me, just because of the it was glide. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, you give me a celebration that has an umbrella, and then we'll have a conversation in terms of whether it's a quality. I mean, what could be an umbrella? I'm just trying to think off the top of my head what implement you could use to kind of outdo an umbrella. I'm trying to think. Paddling pool.
I was going to say something, but I don't think it's suitable. But it was an inflatable type of object, but we'll leave it at that. Maybe an inflatable banana. Okay, then I'm going to give you a different goal. Is it better than? Okay, and I'm not going to just keep doing this for the whole entire episode. Juan Pablo Angel, League Cup against Chelsea, where he turned Terry and Carvalho inside out, smashes it top corner against Carlo Cudicini. Sort of similar goal. Which one's better?
Angel for me, off the top of my head. Just that gut feel. And I think also in terms of the opponent, I know you could, obviously we were turning John Terry, Neil Sullivan in goal. I think, was it Sullivan in goal? In terms of
Cudicini in goal, I think.
We'll get our stats fans to check that in terms of that League Cup game.
Dave Martinez dance. Dave will, I'm sure, let us know who it was. Dave, if you're listening, which you tend to do, and thank you for your listen, put it on the Twitter page who it was that was in goal.
Yeah, and we will, we'll have a poll who was right. The thoughts of the fans. But League Cup quarterfinal, pressure game. I think we hadn't had a great start to the season. I think we were near the bottom of the league just before Christmas. So in terms of that situation as well, I think slightly elevates Angel's goal. But, it's great to be able to talk about great goals, in terms of, I mean, hopefully we won't have to wait 20, 30 years in between other great finishes to be comparing to Ramsey's effort. And hopefully, we mentioned in terms of, it was Chuck Mweka mainly who had been saying the opportunity to work with Gerrard is going to be a motivating factor. But listening to Ramsey after the game, that desire is going to be across a lot of those young players in midfield at Villa, wanting to learn from Gerrard, because, you know, as we touched upon previously, if you're learning from the best, and, you know, Gerrard is, you know, one of the best players of his generation in that position, then, you know, you are going to sit up and pay attention, and that is going to be a selling point for Villa moving forward in terms of the academy players, and also in terms of, you know, the players for the first team who we look to bring in as well. And speaking of players bringing into the first team, and Chukwuemeka nicely comes on to the second goal. Great assist. I mean, you can tell when things have gone well when the opposition all put their hand up for the offside and he was about 2-3 yards on Watkins. Yeah. I mean, the way the pass was timed, executed, absolutely perfect. Great finish. Watkins quietly knocking up his goal total, as we touched upon, you know, playing that focal point up front, working out well for Watkins, linking well with Chukwuemeka. It was a nice touch from Watkins to put, you know, kind of to point go at Chukwuemeka for the assist after the goal. Pretty pleasing all around, kind of that interplay there.
Definitely. I think really the main person who was the most happy was Chukwuemeka, wasn't it? You know, the beaming smile on his face it warms the cockles, you know. It was lovely to see that it was him, and it was his first assist. It was on the telly. It's come at a time when there's uncertainty about his contract, but he's getting more opportunities under Gerrard than he was getting before under Smith. Maybe that made it that little bit sweeter for him that it was against Dean Smith's Norwich, or just Norwich, I think they call them. Watkins, yeah, getting the goals. It's nice to see him getting those goals as well. It was also good to see that it was at a time when him and Ings were on the pitch of each other, and they'd obviously just swapped the positions a little bit, because Ings was playing up front and Watkins was in that deeper 10 role with Chukwuemeka. And Ings had just stepped off to try and get the ball on about the penalty spot, but Watkins had carried on going forward. And Watkins' runs during that match, his intelligence was there for all to see. Veering slightly away from the goal, he had a header that went into the near post that Tim Krul saved. If you watch that 5 seconds before, he's on the other side of the penalty box on the corner of it with the ball, building up the play. And then he moves around to the back post, and his movement again for the goal was great. But as you say, he gave a lot of credit to Chukwuemeka, and he gave the lad a load of confidence. And it was nice afterwards to see Gerrard going up to him, giving him a big hug, seeing what that meant to Chukwuemeka as well. And I think it gives everybody a lift, just knowing that, okay, one of our more creative players, Emi Buendia, and he is one of our more creative players, has gone off, and yet we've been able to bring on someone who's just turned 18, and he's, you know, skinned a Chelsea player, really, in Billy Gilmore, got forward, put a cross in, set up a goal, and he's sort of announced himself. He's done very well in the cameos that he's had recently.
Yeah, and that's all he can do, continuing to impress when he gets the opportunities off the bench, because he will be playing regularly off the bench, and, you know, may get a couple of starts, as we mentioned, over the Christmas period. But mentioning Buendia there, his return to the Canaries cage, how do you think it went?
I thought he played well. I thought he tried hard. He put the effort in. He linked the play well. Some things didn't pull off, but that's the same as any of the games that he's played. You can definitely see that he's more confident. He's getting better with every game. He's adapting to that system. He's playing in a number 10 role, which you look at the start of the season, a lot of Villa fans on Twitter were saying Buendia can't play 10. He's proving that he can, because he's got that freedom to go out wide as well. And not to forget that beautiful nutmeg on Todd Cantwell during the game, which got a big cheer from the Villa fans, won a corner. It's just a shame that he's picked up a knock, because there's talk that he's doubtful for the game on Saturday.
Yeah, and hopefully he is fit to be in consideration. But, you know, the joy of what we've just talked about is hopefully there are players who can step up to replace him if required in the team. It was a pretty solid performance all round, really. And I think we could talk about all of the Villa players in positive fashion, because I don't think there was a bad performance there on the field. But in a Woody's roundup, quick shout out to a couple of players. Obviously, you're going to expect who I'm going to say next. I thought McGinn had another good game in centre midfield. When McGinn's on song, he does McGinn type things, and I thought he did McGinn type things, in terms of to put all of my coaching acumen on the table in a sentence. He does McGinn type things. And so I thought he was solid. I think Matt Targett, he's come under pressure during the course of the season. I think he's stepping up under Gerrard, demonstrating that he's not going to go without a fight in terms of his place in the team. Is that going to mean that we don't target another left back in January or the summer? Probably not. I think that's an area of the squad that still needs improving. But another solid performance from Targett, I thought, and a cheeky flick and almost a great finish from the edge of the box at, 1 point, demonstrating a bit of confidence that perhaps wasn't there a few weeks ago.
I think Targett, as you say, he stepped up under Gerrard. He's just going about his business under the radar, isn't he? Very much so. Playing very well. John McGinn, yeah, he did McGinn things. It was nice that we were able to take him off, that we were that comfortable, even with it just being 1-0, that we were able to take him off so that he can slide tackle Sean Dyche on Saturday, because we know he's going to go after him. I think for me, the one or two players who I would mention, one for that absolutely brilliant little bit of ninja skill that he did in our own box, Tyrone Mings. I mean, heart in mouth. And he's even come out on Twitter and said, yeah, I was a bit worried myself as well. But he made it look so naturally cool how we went past those two players.
Well, fake it till you make it, front it, all those type of cliches coming out there.
My man of the match, though, goes a slightly different way, but staying with the defence. And a shout out also to Matty Cash, because Matty Cash getting forward and defending was absolutely quality. I'd actually give it to Ezri Konsa. I felt that Ezri Konsa just did everything that you needed him to do. It was and these are going to be strong words, it was a Paul McGrath type of performance in the way that he was just so natural, just so cool, didn't have to break sweat. He was everywhere you needed him to be. He got a silly booking, for the descent. But apart from that, you got Pookie running through. He's jogging alongside him like, I'm going to take the ball off you in a minute, mate. We saw it against Liverpool when he's got three of the best attackers in the world running at him, and he manages to take the ball off them. Surely, Gareth Southgate has got to call him up at some point. Otherwise, he's going to risk losing him to Portugal. But Konsa, Rolls Royce of the defender. What a player. Absolutely brilliant.
He does glide across the field, although if I was being uncharitable, I could say that I would look like I was going at a rate of knots alongside Pookie. He's not the quickest. But no, I mean, Konsa is kind of that, I suppose, that, well, I say the traditional type of defender is kind of the clogger, kind of gets stuck in. But that's kind of been slightly outdated for, probably since Rio Ferdinand days, really, in terms of the expectations of a central defender, not necessarily just being who can get up after being clattered the most. But yeah, when they're on song, Konsa and Mings are a good partnership at the back because they offer something different to each other. And calamities in the penalty box aside, I thought it was another solid performance from those two at the back. Have to mention, in terms of briefly, the opposition were struck by injuries kind of, I think, a few COVID-related issues as well. There's been some talk, and you can see simplistically how this can make sense in terms of, because let's be honest, Villa were comfortably the better team. Norwich didn't really lay a glove on us. A lot of the comments have been, oh, so that's why Villa were right to get rid of Dean Smith. I mean, have a look at this game. Norwich didn't really do very much. Villa were brilliant. Therefore, Dean Smith is terrible. Steven Gerrard is brilliant. What I'd say in terms of that is, I think I have to go to Gerrard's kind of comments in the build-up and kind of after the game, in the sense of that was Dean Smith's team on the field for Villa. I mean, well, you can have a debate about how many of those players Dean Smith personally bought and how much kind of Johan Langer and, on the list. So you can debate kind of who had the final say in terms of that. But I think you can have something good yourself without it necessarily meaning that somebody else has something bad. And I think in terms of my view on those comments I heard was that Villa have got to where they are in part because of Dean Smith. You can attribute more or less depending on your viewpoint, but just because that Norwich team didn't turn up on Tuesday, I don't think that means that it's all Dean Smith's fault. I mean, Villa in the Premier League for the third season now. This is Norwich's first season up after coming up from the Championship, yo-yoing club. They're on a different stage of their journey. And I think in terms of if Norwich comes 17th this season, then I think Dean Smith's done a fantastic job at Norwich if they come 17th. I mean, realistically, looking at the table now, I think there's 5 teams in a relegation fight. And, they're thick in it. But it comes to what we've kind of said previously and what sums up the performance, I think, on Tuesday, what sums up the direction of Villa under the manager, Gerrard now, and the board. Ruthless. That was my underriding thing watching that game on Tuesday. It could have been tricky. The way Villa played meant that there was no doubt at all that was going to be nothing but a comfortable win after about 10 minutes. So you get a feel of a game and you can feel like, oh God, this is going to be a bit tricky. This isn't going well. But I thought after 10, even in that bit in the second half, whereby we were missing chances, like, I think we got this. And yeah, ruthless. And I think just because that was a great performance from Villa, I don't think that necessarily means that Dean Smith was terrible. But, we are all aboard the Gerrard bandwagon now here. And, 4 wins in 6. We've done what we needed to do under Gerrard. And I suppose the difference, you can say, of, if you want to call Gerrard an upgrade, the ruthlessness was, we talked kind of end of October. There was a four-game period for Villa. And we were like, this is going to be integral for Dean Smith. I mean, he didn't get through all 4 games, but West Ham lost, Southampton lost. For Gerrard, you could say there's been 4 games where you're like, okay, if you want to do something, you need to win them. And we won the lot. I think that's the difference. And in terms of that competitiveness and that commitment to, we're not accepting anything less than 100%. And so that was manifesting itself on the pitch on Tuesday, and hopefully we'll continue to do so moving forwards.
Yeah, most definitely. You're right. He's won the 4 games that he had the best chance of winning, and even in defeating those other 2, it was all very close. We looked very good defensively. We look more as a team collectively. Dean Smith did a great job. There's no denying that. He got us back to where we were. It wasn't all Super Jack. It was Dean Smith as well. Engineering it with Johan Langer, and getting the right players in, as you mentioned. Norwich did have a lot of players out on Tuesday night. We had players missing as well. It did look more so like it was substitutes and reserve players rather than any first teamers. And Vicky's back, so I better just shoot off at the moment. Is that all right?
Speaking of moving forwards with 100% commitment and ruthlessness, that brings us nicely on to our Burnley preview, Saturday, 3:00 Villa Park. Also, for those watching on our YouTube channel, the ruthlessness of our cut in terms of the eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed a change in location. Will was getting a bit cold outside, so because it's Christmas, we've let him inside, and even with a hat to keep warm. So, we are the podcast that just keeps on giving. And
I'm going to say big props to you for sitting still for all that time while you let me drive back from Sandwell back home, just waiting eagerly.
I mean, some people would say that this was just my natural facial reaction anyway, regardless of what was going on. So, to be able to do it for 3 hours, it's a skill well practiced here. But speaking of reactions, what is the reaction going to be from the Villa fans at full time, 4:45 on Saturday when Burnley come to town? Is it going to be a nightmare before Christmas, or is it going to be It's a Wonderful Life?
It's going to be a jingle all the way. That's how good it's going to be. One of those ones where you think, this isn't quite what you're expecting, but when you really think about it, it's one of the all-time classics. I think we're gonna beat Burnley at the weekend. I think we'll have too much for them. They're starting to improve, aren't they? Or they have been. Anything's an improvement on not winning in your first 7 games. 18th in the league for them, 10th in the league for us. Last year, let's be honest, when we lost 3-2 at Turf Moor, that was probably the start of the decline, really. And Dean Smith, unfortunately, never got out of that. Steven Gerrard comes along. I think if you got Steven and Gerrard in that position against Burnley and you're 2-1 up, you're not going to lose. So yeah, I think we'll be fine. I think we're going to see another 3 points as we carry on our march up the table to sit in the top half of the league come the end of the season.
I mean, Christmas is a time for looking back. And you mentioned there the games last season. The home game was around about a similar time in December where we absolutely battered them. And it was 0-0. And then you mentioned the January game, 3-2. I remember being increasingly irate as the game progressed. And I agree with you in terms of we'd gone through our own, shall we say, issues at the turn of the year in terms of player availability, and the rhythm was knocked out of the team. And games like that against Burnley where you'd expect to win, especially being 2-1 up, the defeat, it did then the rest of the season end up kind of a 1 step forward, 1 step back kind of situation, and gradually the season did kind of meander slightly towards the mid-table finish that we had, where perhaps earlier on in the season we were expecting, dreaming of, a potential finish higher up the table and maybe those elusive European spots that we've been chasing for a long time. But you mentioned Burnley in terms of this season. As you said, 18th in the league. And it does show what you can prove anything with numbers. Only 1 win this season after 15 games, which with the best analysis in the world, you'd say is not very good. Mm-hmm. But they've been more difficult to beat in recent weeks in terms of, so they've only lost 7 of the 15, which is less than Villa have lost this season. Yeah. 8 draws. So, what you'd expect from Burnley being difficult to beat has carried on through. Goal scoring, not really their forte, even when they are playing well. In this season, time recording, I think 14, less than a goal a game, one of the lowest in the league. But they've only conceded 21, which is one of the best in the league in terms of that, best in that mini league, I should say. It is, kind of that defensive solidarity that you'd expect from a Burnley team. So there's a lot kind of to unpack. I mean, in terms of they haven't scored in 3 games. And they were due to play Watford on Wednesday night, which was postponed due to COVID-related issues, which does Villa a favour. Firstly, in terms of Burnley being, out of a rhythm, in terms of it's been a little while since it's only a week, but, in terms of when you're winning games, like Villa won on against Norwich, as we discussed in the first half of the show, it's kind of, you want to go back out again, kind of keep that momentum going. Burnley haven't had that. And I think in terms of Watford would have been their opponents, massive game that would have been. If Burnley would have got a win, which Potentially, I could see it being a 1-0 ground out kind of Sean Dyche special.
Yeah.
That would have taken them to Villa Park, with a little bit of momentum, but they haven't got that potential, 6-pointer would have been down there. I mean, Watford and Burnley, you're going to expect are going to be in the bottom 5. We won't say relegated just yet, but yeah, you expect they're going to be struggling. And so psychologically, I think they've missed out on that boost, which is going to work out for Villa. And at time of recording, they're only bright. Well, I say only bright spark. It's not entirely true. They're a functional team. Last season, their bright spark was Dwight McNeil. This season, they brought in Carney. Spent, by Burnley standards, quite a lot of money on him. Time of recording, hasn't been declared fit for Saturday. May or may not make the team. If he doesn't play, I think that's a massive blow for Burnley because he's been one of their bright sparks. And in terms of how the game is going to play out, we've talked about previously in terms of Villa's tactical approach and, being a bit certain or a bit more certain under Gerrard now about how Villa are going to play. I don't think there's going to be much head scratching required for how Burnley are going to turn out on Saturday, regardless of the 11 they put out. It is going to be in your face, kind of solid 4-4-2 or 4-5-1 if they want to spring, a bit of a more defensive team. And it is just going to be, it's going to be vintage Dyche, isn't it? And, you're mentioning in terms of, we'll come on to our predictions a bit later in terms of the score, mentioning, that Villa, in your view, are going to win the game. Where do you think this game is going to be won on the field against Burnley?
I think the game will be won with the midfield runners, to be honest with you. I look at the Burnley team, and the one player I thought would have been their key man was Cornetto, however you pronounce it. And you look at him, they brought him, he's a left back. He's ended up playing up front, scoring some absolute bangers, let's be fair.
Yep.
Apart from him, McNeil isn't cut from the same cloth as the rest of the Burnley team, really. He's more of he'll take players on, he'll cut inside, he'll score really dreadful goals that should be stopped, like he did last season against us. But apart from that, everybody else is just a hoof upfield, hold it up, knock it down, try and head it in type of player for them. They're a bunch of bricklayers, if you like, without sounding horrible. That's what you galvanise from their team, really. Wood is going to cause problems for us, I think, though the form that Mings is in, he should be fine against him, providing that Wood's fit, that is. They're of a danger man, or danger men will be the types of players who you wouldn't normally think of, but if you put them in your fantasy football team this weekend, I guarantee they'll score you a couple of points. Jay Rodriguez and Mattia Vidra, I think those will be there too. Keyman against us, they're the types of players who do well against us. But I do feel that our number 10s will be key in deciding this, whether that's Watkins in a bit of a deeper role, whether it's JJ, Buendia's fit, Carney even. I think it'll be those ones who can get in between the lines, especially, as you say, if Dyche sticks to his tried and trusted 4-4-2 formation, then those gaps are there, and it allow Ings or Watkins, whoever's up front, to really get in between players, because the defence are going to have to step out to them. So that's what I'm thinking. What about you?
I mean, I do think, in terms of bricklayers, I mean, you do want a solid wall in your house. I mean, if you got dodgy bricklayers, then a lot of things can go wrong quite quickly. I do agree that they are a functional team, but they've been doing what they've been doing at Burnley for a number of years and staying in the Premier League. There is always the way human nature works. The first couple of years they're in the Premier League, I did think they would go down. And then when they kept staying up, I kind of, even though and football is not played on paper, it's played on grass and all that. Even though you're looking at the team over the last few seasons thinking they are going to struggle again, because they've always managed to find a way in the first few seasons. I've almost stopped backing Burnley. Well, I have stopped backing Burnley to go down, as it were. And even last season, they had not a great start then either, and did just enough kind of. If you're thinking in terms of who went down last season, and obviously Burnley didn't, you're thinking, oh yeah, it was comfortable. Not really. I think that's just what Burnley have been doing in terms of the last few years. You just think that they're always going to be a permanent fixture, but it is going to be in terms of the simplistics of football. If you only win 1 out of 15, you got to start winning somewhere. I mean, there's only so many games you can draw. And I do agree with you in terms of it is going to be that midfield battle. The pace of Villa, I think, is going to be key. I mean, I think we know how Burnley are going to play. They're going to sit back. They're not going to throw everybody forward at us. And we've got to be clever enough, patient enough to be able to break them down and get stuck into the physical battle that is no doubt going to take place. And in terms of those midfield runners are going to be key, because we're going to outnumber them in midfield in terms of if we're 3-2-1 or however you're looking at it. That is going to be the area where we have to play with pace and really get at Burnley, because the defensive line is solid. Tarkowski, Ben Mee, solid centre backs. In terms of, if you're looking in terms of quality, I mean, you wouldn't put them in the bottom 3 in terms of if you're doing a league table of centre-back partnerships. I mean, they're solid. So the game, I think, you almost need to take them out of the game. If you're trying to go through them, that centre-back partnership, you're going to struggle. I mean, we know Watkins has been doing very well in terms of holding the ball up, but he's not going to run through them. I think it's going to be that pace, that trickery, in order to break down Burnley. We've got to be too clever for him, and that will hopefully lead to a positive result. But that is easy for me to say in terms of pace, trickery, other Mike Bassett buzzwords to get in there. In terms of who's going to deliver it on the field for Villa, are you following fitness depending, of course? At time of recording, we're not entirely sure of the latest status in the pre-match press conference for Villa ahead of the game, so there may be further unavailability we don't know of. But based on what we know at time of recording, are you sticking with the mantra of don't change a winning team, or would you be looking to freshen it up with a couple of changes?
I think it's always worth looking at the opposition, to be honest with you. I do understand the don't change a winning team, but if you're looking at Burnley and you think, okay, creativity, trickery, running at them, clever through balls is going to be a deciding factor, especially when you think about someone like Matty Cash bombing forward down that right hand side, because he caused Norwich no end of problems on Tuesday night, and I imagine we'll have the same sort of areas that we attack into. Then, to be honest with you, I'd be looking to potentially bring Carney in. He's buzzing anyway off his goal. Even if you only give him 60, 75 minutes or so, bring him in, whether that's for Young or whether it's for Buendia, because those are the two who look to be injured. Then they could make a big difference for us. Those two behind Watkins, or one of them behind Ings with Watkins alongside them. We can then be quite versatile and change to a 3-1-2 if we needed to. I think it's worth. The defence stays the same, goalkeeper stays the same. Douglas Luiz you have to keep John McGinn in if John McGinn's fit. One, just so that he can verbally abuse Sean Dyche again,
obviously.
But number 2, because he has been fantastic, and none more so than in the last few games. So, I would be looking at some amendments to the team, some improvements for the game ahead. I think I wouldn't be surprised to see Carney in that starting 11.
I mean, that appears to be the most obvious potential change if either Young or Buendia are not fit for Saturday. For me, if Buendia is fit, he starts. I think we need to try and build on, I think we touched upon in terms of our reviews of the games over the last few weeks. It's not world-class form, but in terms of its progress, and that is kind of to get his confidence up, that is what we need. And I think a run of the team is what is required here. And he's not exactly disgracing himself when he's been playing the last few weeks. So if he's fit, he starts. If Ashley Young's fit, do we play Chukwuemeka instead? It's an interesting call, that one, because in terms of pace, Chukwuemeka's quicker than him. So, if you're looking at pure physical battle in terms of those attributes, then yeah, you do play Chukwuemeka. But what did he, I don't know if advantage is the right word, but for Burnley, their system is tried and tested, both tactically, but also shithousery in terms of, the going in hard but fair, I suppose, if you were describing it generously.
I don't think Wesley would agree with that.
No, he probably wouldn't. Who is going to be better to withstand that from the start and give a bit back? I probably would say Young out of those two. So I probably would play Young if he's fit, but with the proviso of, unless if the game's going badly wrong, I suppose he comes on quicker. But with almost, you can't guarantee anything, but lining up Chukwuemeka and say, look, you are getting half an hour here, at least in the second half, because I think by that stage, as we saw on Tuesday night against Norwich, the space is going to be there for Chukwuemeka to exploit, and I think he could do a lot of damage against this Burnley team. But I'd leave it to Young to build the foundations first, to carry on with our bricklaying analysis, to soften them up, and then bring Chukwuemeka on to finish them off, as it were. So, but I can see, in terms of, if you were going to follow my previous statement in literal letter, you'd start with Chukwuemeka. But yeah, I certainly think that there is going to be scope for him to be involved, and he should be. And, the fans are going to be giving him a great reception, as, they always do for the homegrown players, in particular those who are making an impact. I mean, gone are the days whereby some of the young players coming on, you're giving you support thinking, yeah, I'm not convinced that these are really going to be good enough here. And you can usually tell in terms of a lot of young players, not all young players, but kind of those on the periphery who've left Villa over the last 10 years, haven't really gone on to do very much. 9 out of 10. I mean, some have gone on to have very good careers elsewhere in terms of Championship, League One, League Two, etc. But in terms of the young players coming through at Villa now, if they do leave, there's a few who you're thinking, oh God, they're going to come back and haunt us, in terms of teams around us in the league or potentially higher, which is a testament to the work being done at the academy over the last few years, and now is beginning to bear fruit. But in terms of immediately bearing fruit on Saturday afternoon, you've mentioned you think Villa are going to win. What do you think the score is going to be?
Oh, put me on the spot a little bit. I think we get a 2-0, to be honest with you, at least 2-0. I don't see us conceding unless, Jay Rodriguez punches the ball in again, like we did for West Brom. I think we get a 2-0 win. I think Watkins, Banks, and who knows, hopefully JJ, if someone like that gets their first home goal. But I'm confident that we will keep a clean sheet, despite you mentioning how Burnley have done in regards to goals conceded, not as bad as everybody else around them, really. You say they're not scoring enough goals. They bagged 3, didn't they, against Palace? So if they've only scored 14 all season, then you've pretty much got a fifth of them in one game, which isn't the greatest. We look like we'll score all the time in every game that we play. Even when we lost 3-0 to Chelsea, we looked like we could score goals. Watkins missed a few chances. So that's why I'm going to go with a 2-0. I think we'll get into an early lead, and then we may see some of the changes that you've mentioned there. If we do start Young or we do start Chukwuemeka, then we can replace them with an hour, 75 minutes gone. And if we make it to 2-0 quite quickly, I could see us getting a few. I don't think it'll be long before we absolutely cream somebody in regards to like a 4-0. 5-0, 5-1. A Man City leads, maybe not that many goals, but you can see that it's going to come. Gerrard, I don't think he's happy if it's 1-0 or 2-0 or 3-0. He wants to score as many goals as we can, just to really help. And when we're on -2 as well for our goal difference, these goals come the end of the season, especially if we are pushing for Europe, and you've got the likes of West Ham and Leicester and a couple of the other teams who are having a little bit of a wobble, then those goals could mean European prizes.
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of picking up on the goal difference point, and I'll put you on the spot with your score prediction. I'm going to put you on the spot even more now.
Okay.
If you were going to hazard a guess of how many teams in the Premier League at time of recording, so we're recording before the Thursday night round of fixtures in the Premier League. If you're going to hazard a guess, how many teams have a goal difference of +1 or higher? So 0 wouldn't count in terms of this. If they scored the same as conceded, not count. So it has to be positive. How many teams in the Premier League have a positive goal difference?
I'm going to go for quite a low number. I'm going to go for 6 teams in the Premier League got a positive goal difference.
And you would be, as I'm glancing over at the league table just to add up the numbers, you would be correct. It is 6. You've got 2 teams with 0 goal difference. So in terms of, and Arsenal are one of those teams whose goal difference is 1, +1. And you've got Man United whose goal difference is +2. So you got, out of those 6, 2 are dangerously close kind of to negative goal difference. So of the remaining teams in the league, 2 break even, 12 with a negative goal difference. Demonstrating the point perfectly that you're making in terms of that a lot of difference can be made, you know, in that goal difference, because for various reasons, maybe including teams at the bottom end of the table getting shebanged by teams like Man City, you mentioned, beating Leeds 7-0 earlier in the week. You know, and there's a lot of gap. I mean, in terms of, if you look in terms of from time recording from 13th to 6th, so Man United in 6th, Brighton in 13th, going up from Brighton, goal differences -3, -1, 0, -2, which is Villa, 0, -1, -1, 2. As you say, that is not a wide margin between, you know, 6, 7 teams who are going to be, if their seasons go to plan, competing for those European places. So I definitely agree with your point there in terms of, you know, those couple of goals are going to make a key difference come the end of the season. And the fact that Villa, even when not playing very well, have looked like scoring goals. I mean, there's not that many games Villa haven't scored. I mean, I think Liverpool away we didn't score, Southampton away we didn't score, off the top of my head, and FAC fans will be able to correct us. That's only 3 games that come immediately to mind where we didn't score. So even Arsenal away where we were terrible, we even scored then. So scoring goals, you sense, isn't going to be a problem, hopefully, touch wood. And if the defence gets tightened up, which it has been in recent weeks, those key differentials in terms of turning a 2-0 into a 3-0, a 3-1 into a 4-1 potentially, could make that big difference at the end of the season. But coming back to the score predictions for this game, I do think that this is a first for the Talk of the Trinity podcast this season, and it is going to make the polls quite difficult in terms of what we're going to do for this. I'm going to predict the same score as you. I think we're going to win 2-0. And in terms of, we're going to go on our hot streak. We both predicted us to beat Norwich, so winning streak of 1 that we're both on board with. So rolling again in terms of Villa continuing this winning run. I would say other times I predicted 2-0 Villa to win at home. It has happened, Brighton and Newcastle. So hopefully we will continue that streak. But largely for the same reasons as you've touched on, I think we're just going to be too good for Burnley. I think the confidence is there under Gerrard. Even, you know, we mentioned losing to Liverpool last week. Played well. I mean, Liverpool have taken teams apart this season, and pretty much most games they have scored at least 2. So for us to, you know, not that you want to be in a position mentality wise where you're saying, yeah, only losing by a certain number of goals is great, we're really happy about it. Realistically, Liverpool are one of the best teams in Europe, and we've got a manager who's been there a month. So in the circumstances, not a bad result. I mean, also Man City, we lost 2-1. And as we've mentioned a couple of times, that Leeds absolutely got steamrolling by them. So, in terms of looking defensively solid as well. And so Burnley, lack of goals. Yeah, I can see this being a real issue for them. I think it's going to be the battle. Mings is going to relish. Mentioned Konza's in good form, able to clear up if any dalliances across the penalty box maybe need them sorting with. But yeah, I mean, I think in terms of that midfield battle we mentioned is key. McGinn looks like he's in form. Ramsey's confidence is going to be up if he plays. You've got Brundia and Young coming into solid form, I think we can say. And Watkins is not beginning, we've mentioned it over the last few weeks, he's picking up goals now, and his general hold-up play has been very good, which I think he's going to need once more against those Burnley centre-backs on Saturday, because they're not going to be giving any change out. They're not giving out any Christmas treats, in terms of that. We're going to have to work for it. But I think the quality that we've got and the confidence is going to tell. So 2-0 Villa for me as well. In terms of pre-Christmas delights, I think we'll be going under our trees at 4:45 on Saturday and unwrapping 3 points to really push these Christmas metaphors to the absolute limit. So being as though it is Christmas, and it is the season for giving. We've talked about Norwich, we've talked about Burnley, but Will, are there any final thoughts before we wrap up that you would like to share, discuss with the fans, or are we all set for our Christmas break?
I think we're pretty much all set for our Christmas break. It's obviously been a pleasure talking all things Villa for these last few months since we've restarted the podcast again. It's very nice to have 1,500 followers on Twitter. Thank you to everybody who has. The followers and subscribers are slowly going up, but they are going up on YouTube, and so are the downloads as well. It's very much appreciated. I think on top of that, we've got some exciting times ahead. With some of the guests that we're lining up onto the podcast in the future, more international Villans, Australia, New Zealand, Mexico, Antarctica also involved in that as well. Even maybe some from the Black Country, who knows? On top of that, though, our next episode, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about. Well, we've got 2 episodes that we're looking to record soon, haven't we? We'll have our Burnley review, and hopefully we'll be saying, all right, Baz, you can carry on predicting 2-0 Villa wins.
Yep, he's hoping.
And we're going to, yeah, he's hoping. But we're also then going to bundle together Chelsea, Leeds and Brentford and do a general overview of that. But I am very excited for is the transfer window, the first leg podcast that we're going to do. Bit different to the first half and second half one that we did previously, because there's going to be a month apart between the first leg and the second leg, in the fact that we've got some special guests coming on, and confirmed so far. We've got Liam from the Qatar Lions, we've got Russell from the Cayman Villans, and we've got Dave from the Irish Lions. We're hoping to maybe add 1 or 2 more to that as well. We're going to talk and predict ahead of the transfer window. That'll be a nice hour to 90-minute podcast. And then we're going to try and get those same people back on at the start of February to see whether their predictions all came true and whether Villa got any bargains in those January sales. So there you go. That's something that we're looking at recording next week, and that will be released just before the new year.
So plenty to look forward to, and plenty to keep us busy during the festive period. So we will be back with you next week for our Burnley review to see whether we will be making a pact never to back the same result again, or whether we will keep going with the joint approach. And looking forward to the Christmas period as well, because there's plenty of games coming up, and there's a lot of movement potentially in the Premier League table, with a lot of clubs fighting for points in the same area. So it's going to be a make or break period for some clubs and their aspirations during the course of the season. We'll touch upon what it means for Villa in the course of their season ahead of that transfer window, which we'll be bringing our thoughts on to you round about the new year. So it's the perfect time for us to wrap things up. And that is a terrible Christmas pun if ever you've heard one.
Oh,
Ahead of Saturday's game. So check us out in the meantime on our Twitter page at Talk Trinity, our YouTube channel at Talk Trinity. You know, we already had the name sorted, so you know we didn't need to meddle with it too much. And also our podcast, if you want to listen to us, we're on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, Stitcher. Are we on Google? We may be on Google.
Yeah.
We're on Google.
Ask Alexa, she'll play it.
Yeah. Well, I think I need to stop talking right now. So you can go and talk to Alexa to listen to us again, you know, in terms of check out some of our other previous podcasts that we've done during the course of the season. If maybe in front of an open fire and, you know, with the stockings hanging on the mantle. So from me, thanks very much for listening or watching if you're on the YouTube channel. Hope you enjoyed the game on Saturday, and we'll be back with you soon.
yeah, and from me and from my dog that you can probably hear barking downstairs, the little pain. Cheers, Tar. Thank you very much. If you're there on Saturday, hopefully I'll see you. I'm Villa till I die. Up the Villa.